Welcome back to Magic Hour Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Page.
And this is Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
So, today we have such an exciting conversation with Amy Stark, who is an energy healer, and she's a science teacher turned energy healer. And we're going to talk all about her journey and all of the cool stuff that she's done. But conversations like this just light me up so freaking much because I really love to take a scientific, evidential approach to mystical work. And I really think that it is two sides of the same coin. And I think that it's part of our evolution of consciousness to not just spiritually outsource all of our power and sort of be in this superstitious, dogmatic place with spirituality, but to actually realize that we can start to understand how to generate conducive conditions for magic, how things that are spiritual phenomenon that so many people experience, how it actually works or what the scientific language is. Like these things can be replicated. Story can't be replicated. And I think like the spiritual space is so ripe with like story and imagination that if it just went away would not be rewritten the next day. It's like an amalgamation of superstitious stories passed down from generation to generation, even with mediumship and things like that. And I think that slowly but surely the pendulum is swinging and we're evolving in consciousness to be like, no, these are inherent human traits. These are inherent magic tied to being here on planet Earth. It's like things that can be replicated and studied and quantified, even if it takes a while to catch up to what people have been saying or have known for generations.
I think it's so exciting because, I mean, we were saying before we jumped on, I kind of came from a background of more of a scientific way of thinking about things. And like, if you can't weigh it and measure it and point to it and hold it in your hand, then that means it's not real. And I feel like there's been such a cool expansion of what we feel and see as possible and what science can define. Because, science is really just defining and giving words and ideas to things that already exist. Like, gravity exists whether or not we know how to define it and quantify it. And science helps us like talk about it. And so I think that's been happening more and more in such a cool way with this type of stuff where we can really anchor it into science as well, and they don't have to be two separate ideas. And that's just so exciting to me.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And for some reason, what pops into my head is this idea that, like, for consciousness to evolve, we have to start believing women. And the way that women have been excluded from science and study for so many generations. And of course, there's amazing women in science and places of academic research now, but they weren't allowed there for a long time. And I just think that if that wouldn't have happened, if women were never excluded and like burnt at the stake for practicing medicine and were still included in scientific institutions, I think this branch of the fusion of science and magic and the study of that would have happened so much sooner and we would be so much more advanced. I really feel a strong tie to patriarchal values and materialism because I think women are naturally maybe a little more sensitized to spirit. It doesn't mean that men aren't connected to or can't be like amazing mediums. I've met so many of them. But I just think in terms of my business and the listenership of this podcast and who I see every day, it is like predominantly women that I'm surrounded by with this work. It like interests us. We can feel it. We're into it. And I think that not taking it seriously is also a symptom of not listening to women or believing women.
Yeah, so well put. I think you're really right on with that. And I think, maybe another piece of it too of why not as many men are in this space is I think that's part of patriarchy too, to kind of cut men off from their feeling life, from their intuition and, not foster that element of their lived experience as much as women have been allowed to foster it. But yeah, I agree. I think allowing the voices and insights and ideas of women only helps all of us. And it's been so cool to watch that happen naturally as women have been empowered and allowed to speak up and have ownership over their ideas and move through the same spaces that have been so withheld from them.
absolutely. And like the deeper I go on my healing journey, I don't really care if people believe in this or not anymore. Like I was gonna say, I can't wait until the day that some naysayer comes up to me and I hand them a peer reviewed study about mediumship phenomena or something like that. But at this point, I'm like, actually, I don't really care. They can believe whatever they want. I'm like, wow, that's a sign of healing. But it still does make me happy because it legitimizes it and it makes it a safer space for customers and people seeking help. There can be a standard of accreditation when this is actually quantifiable and understood. It won't just be the wild west of superstition and fear and peddling like snake oil salesmen. So I think it's a good thing overall. And I think that it's just really exciting to see people like Amy and people in this work who are like, no, I'm so confident in my abilities and I have worked on this for over a decade and I am confident enough to be studied. Like, look at what I'm doing. So exciting. Before I introduce her, though, I just wanted to say there's a lot of new listeners to Magic Hour this season. Welcome, you guys. We're so excited to have you here.
Yes, we're so excited to have you.
Yes. And so, something that I wanted to say, I don't think I've said it since maybe episode 301, is that we have an angel/mediumship reading giveaway with me that will happen when we hit 288 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. We already hit it on Spotify. We appreciate your 5-star reviews so, so much. It's a free way to support the pod. We have so much important content scheduled for this season. And I feel this igniting in my soul of like matriarchal fire and wanting to just help consciousness progress and give the conversations that I know so many of us are craving in this moment. And so if you get a lot out of the podcast, the 5-star reviews, subscribing to our YouTube and sharing our show on social media and tagging us are all free, awesome ways to support us, as well as subscribing, of course. And so if you do any of those things and send us a screenshot to contact@magichourpod.com, we will enter you into the next reading giveaway. One person will win a reading and 2 people will win any 3-part workshop of mine of their choice. So it's the biggest giveaway that we've done yet. I think we're just under 25-star reviews away on Apple Podcasts at time of recording. So I absolutely cannot wait to connect with the next winner.
So exciting. Yeah, send in those reviews. It helps us so much and it helps more people connect to the pod. So, yeah, for so many reasons, please send in your reviews.
Yes. So without further ado, for nearly 2 decades, Amy has guided thousands around the globe to release trauma, rewire limiting beliefs, and reclaim their power using a unique fusion of energy medicine, neuroscience, and intuitive wisdom. With a degree in psychology, a master's in education, and certifications in Reiki, EFT, and reconnective healing, Amy brings both rigor and soul to her work. A passionate biohacker and lifelong student of consciousness, she empowers people to align with their highest potential mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Her groundbreaking book, Bridging the Divide, A Powerful Path to Personal Transformation by Healing the Mind, Body, and Spirit, offers a blueprint for deep healing and awakening, integrating scientific insight with spiritual truth. Whether guiding individuals or speaking to global audiences, Amy is known for her grounded presence, transformative energy, and unwavering belief in what's possible when we heal from the inside out. Welcome, welcome, Amy. Amy, welcome to Magic Hour. So excited to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we chatted briefly before we got on that I always start the podcast interviews with the astrology of the guest. And I know you just know your sun sign. So will you tell our community what that is?
Sure. Yes. I am a Gemini and I am born on the 22nd. And I'm also a twin, which is crazy.
I know. When you told me that, I was like, you must say that again when I hit record because astrologers are living for that right now.
I'm on the cusp, so it's very interesting. I do have a few qualities of Taurus, but I would say the vast majority of me is very similar to Gemini.
Yeah, we need to find your birth time, girl, because I feel like that's so juicy.
It was after the hockey game, the Stanley Cup. The doctor was like, okay, now I can have you give birth to my mom.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah, that's so interesting. And your Mercury might be in Taurus, or you might be a Taurus rising, and Venus might be in Taurus. Some of the faster moving planets that travel closer to the sun can be in the sign before or after the one that you were born in. So you might have that Taurus flavors with some other planets. I love that. And it makes sense too if you have little Taurus with all that body work and energy stuff and connection to the body that you feel. But even the Gemini of like interpersonal teaching and speaking and writing and researching, like that makes a lot of sense to me too, because you wear many different hats and you're very educated in many different things. And that's very Gemini as well. So, the second question that I like to ask our guests is, how does your intuition speak to you? And I know that it might be kind of a whole podcast worth of an answer, but just whatever aspect of it you feel called to share.
Well, so here's the thing. I get them all. So I would say that I hear stuff, but I feel stuff the most. I know stuff, just a deep inner knowing. So I have all the clairs essentially. Probably not so much like there's one that's like smelling, that's occasionally. But I would say that for sure, I am extremely sensitive to energy. So that's the number one place I feel things, know things.
I'm the same as you. Feeling and knowing were my main two, and then seeing came on third. And it's kind of an interesting journey. And I think it's a common journey for people that start with feeling and knowing. I think those are really common ones. But sometimes without the seeing or the hearing off the bat, it can be really hard to trust our feeling and knowing, or we can be really disconnected. I think starting with those two is oftentimes an interesting journey of actually even claiming our intuitive connection or recognizing it. And so I'm wondering what that looked like for you, like in just being sensitive to energy, but maybe without the education of what that meant, like how you found your way to this work.
Sure. So originally, I was really stressed out. I was a New York City public school science teacher. And I sat down in meditation and I was really enjoying it. I was actually starting to let go and I had never felt so much peace. So I started doing it longer and longer. And eventually I was meditating one morning and I thought of my twin sister and my eyes started to burn. And I was like, that's weird. Like, why would my eyes start burning? So I opened my eyes and I was like, they feel fine now. So maybe that was just like something weird. Closed them again and they started to burn. So I was like, you know what, let me just see if this is connected to my sister. Maybe it's twin tuition. Maybe something's going on with her. So I gave her a call and I was like, hey, Sarah, how are you doing? And she was like, oh my gosh, I have a double pink eye infection. Did mom tell you? And I was like, that's really weird. I thought about her, then my eyes burned, and then she confirmed she had something going on with her. So then the next day, same thing. I'm sitting in meditation. I think of my dad, and all of a sudden my tooth starts hurting. And I'm like, okay, yesterday, this is what happened. Like I was feeling what dad obviously had. So I call my mom and I'm like, cause I couldn't possibly talk to my dad about it. I was like, Mom, where is dad or how is he doing? He's like, oh, he's at the dentist right now. He bit down on a walnut and broke his tooth. So at that point, I had definitive evidence to me that I was picking up accidentally on other people's pain and feeling it very clearly in my own body and knowing who it was connected to. So that was really the first thing that I truly knew without a doubt. So I was connecting to something outside of me. And then beyond that, it became like visions. Like, so I would see the sequence of events that were about to happen in somebody's life. And then it would happen. And it would happen with such precision that I was like, the science teacher in me was like, okay, I cannot, disregard this. And then I started hearing things. So I started having like, I'd be talking to somebody and they'd be like, oh, my arm's hurting or something like that. And I would hear vitamin E oil. And I'd be like, what? I never even knew that vitamin E oil could be used to help something like that. The craziest one was when I heard a medication I had never heard of. And I was able to tell the person, I said, I keep hearing this medication. What is that? And she's like, oh, that's the one I'm wondering if I should be taking. And I was like, okay, well, there's confirmation that it's in your field. You might want to look into that. So that was pretty much my progression. And again, like I have that science teacher in me that was like keeping track of what I was thinking, what I was feeling, what I was seeing, what was happening in real life over and over and over again, just stacking the evidence because truly I felt like I was losing my mind. I mean, I didn't know anybody who could do what I was doing. I didn't know what the purpose of any of it was. And especially the pain in my body, feeling other people's pain. Like, what was I supposed to do about that? Now, of course, 18 years later, I understand what to do with that and how helpful that is. But in the beginning, it was very unnerving.
Wow, that is so powerful. And I love so much that you're a science teacher because I think we need more grounded, practical, evidential people in these fields to really show that it's real and also push us into new precipices of what's possible with this work when we think about it in that scientific, evidential way. Like, I love the fusion of science and magic. So, this is making me so happy. And I relate to what you're saying so much because clairsentience is one of my main clairs too. And I remember I was like in line at CVS or something, and there was a man in front of me, like a young man, and I just heard throat cancer. And I felt this pain in my throat and this kind of like shadow around my throat. And this is when I also thought I was crazy and I was a waitress and I was feeling the emotions of all the tables I was going to. And it was like I had no understanding and therefore no boundaries or clarity and like what was mine, what wasn't. And I remember being like, that's crazy. Like, why would I even think that? And then he got to the front of the line, was like, I'll have a pack of cigarettes. And his voice was like so crazy, even though he was this young guy. And I was like, whoa, he was buying cigarettes. And I just knew, like, whoa, what I was getting is right. So I think that that is such a good example of taking these numinous concepts and like grounding it in. Like, I love how precise and evidential your story is. Like, that twin tuition is so interesting too, because we haven't had a guest on yet to like really talk about that. So that's like a whole other cool thing. But just that clarity and simplicity, like no trying to be impressive, no adding layers, no attachment of story, just like my eyes are burning. I'm thinking of my twin. And as soon as I give the message, that sensation goes away. Like, that is so cool to me. And so I want to talk a little bit into your journey of like, okay, I'm getting these feelings, they're being validated. There's evidence here that appeases the science teacher in me. And now, how did you start to tease it out and round it out and get to where you are today?
Well, so during one of the meditations, I heard the message, you can heal with your hands. And I had never heard of that before. When I was 30 years old, I finally started not being chronically ill. And it was right before then that I started to dive into energy healing. And around that time, I heard, well, it was actually the first thing I heard was, you can heal with your hands. And I was like, what does that even mean? And so I said it to somebody who I trusted. I said, I've heard this. I don't know what it means. And they were like, oh, there's classes down the street you could take. And I was like, there are more people like me? Like, this is insane. I had no idea. So I started taking Reiki classes and I became a Reiki master eventually after 3 years. And that was really how I got introduced to the energy body, energy flowing through your hands. The whole idea of distance energy healing was just like blew my mind. I remember that. So Reiki 2, you go and you learn about distance healing, and they put me in another room and I'm like, this is such baloney. Like, cause the science teacher in me was like, no way. And I go in the other room and it felt like somebody was pulling on my clothes the entire time. And I was like, what the heck? And I knew exactly when they started and that's exactly when it ended. And I was like, somebody's going to walk in and tell me it's over. And right then they opened the door and they're like, okay, you're done. And I was like, what just happened? Like, I have to understand everything about this. So then I started looking into the quantum physics of it all and how we are connected to energy, the universe and everything at large. You know, I just had to dive in real deep on all the science because I just wanted to keep understanding and staying grounded in all of it. I remember when one of the first books, and maybe you've read it before, it's called The Biology of Belief. And it's how, in that book, he talks about how we are energetic beings, which again, I had never heard. As a science teacher, I was like unaware of this and I felt ridiculous for not knowing this. But then when he broke it down, I was like, duh, of course. So that helped me to find the science and the spirit and what I was feeling. And I kept going. I just kept being like, okay, if this happened, then why? You know? So that's why I finally wrote a book after 18 years. I felt like I had enough of this information. I've coached so many people through their own healing journey. I went through my own, a huge transformation for myself, being sick for 30 years and then not requiring, first of all, I was told I would never get off the medicines that I was on and never feel better and only get worse, really. And I was like, what if that's not my reality? What if I choose something different? And that also was part of why I started going down the paths that I went down. I found it so fascinating how beautifully created we are to heal, to express love, and how connected we are. Like it was blowing me away how divine it all is.
Oh, that story gives me full body chills. And I also really connect to that. How is this possible to do this remotely? Because my practice, I'm also like an evidential medium and intuitive. And when COVID hit, I started going virtual for the first time because I was doing everything in person. And I was like, how is this possible? But it's so true. Like, spirit and energy is not limited by time or space. It's just our human consciousness that's limited. And as you were talking, I just got this download because I think a really common misconception is that ghosts or spirits or whatever get stuck in places. And that's just not true. They can go anywhere. And I think that we project human consciousness onto spirit, and there's always like an inverted message. So, like, this common misconception that spirit or energy can get stuck shows that we feel stuck or we feel trapped or we feel like we can't change in some way or aren't free to shift out of our energetic circumstances. And so I love your story because it's like we are also an energy body, and energy isn't restricted by time or space. And we can make a new choice and we can heal, and we don't have to be stuck in these decade-long stories of pain. And as somebody who has an autoimmune as well and has also struggled with PCOS my whole life, like, this work has been so in tandem with healing my physical body as well. So I'm just really inspired by what you're saying.
Well, you're welcome. Here's the transformation that happened for me, and this is going to hit home for you too. So I learned that we are energy and that you could pick up on the emotions and the feelings that people are having. But everything really came together when I learned something that's called EFT, and that's called Emotional Freedom Technique. And the reason why I found that technique was because I had decided the science teacher in me wanted to see 8 of the same people with the same diagnosis. So I could see what does it really look like, over and over and over again. How does it present in these people? And what I found, which I was not expecting, was that it had the same energetic signature. And I went looking to figure out within their bodies, how do they have this same signature? What is creating this signature, this energy signature? And it was emotions, and it was trauma, and it was limiting beliefs and fears and programs, and they were all the same. And so I was like, I need a tool that will help to rewrite this. And that's EFT. So I saw these patterns and I said, I need a way to release the emotions to then change the signature. And once I did that, I started seeing people change rapidly because there's nothing for the symptoms. Well, you have to speak, carefully about stuff. The symptoms couldn't really hold on to anything because the energy was changing and shifting and no longer present. So things started to just drift away from them, like meaning fatigue and lack of resilience. And it was easier for them to sleep, and they no longer had cravings for sugar. They started talking to themselves better. Like, their progress started to move so rapidly when they started to do this inner work with me. I was helping them through it using EFT. My gift is really seeing the energy layers coming off of people when they're tapping and releasing these stories, the trauma, the limiting beliefs. Because I'd be like, okay, right now I'm seeing you at 17 years old talking to your father, wanting the car, you're having an argument. Do you recall what that is? Because that layer is ready to come off. So let's tap and talk through that. And then they would tap and it would be released. And they would have this totally new orientation to the world, which then kept their nervous system a lot calmer, which helped them to heal for longer periods of time. So it's a little bit like chipping away at something, and eventually you work your way to totally healed.
That is so interesting. And I really understand what you mean about emotional signatures, because when you've like tapped into energy long enough, you see the patterns. And maybe there isn't like a clear answer for this, but just let me know. Sometimes when I tune in, I feel like mental health stuff very strongly. And there's a signature that I know that when I feel it, the person that I'm talking about or connecting with is like on the spectrum of narcissism. And so, do you think that EFT and tapping and releasing stored trauma and emotions, maybe it might be different for someone with full diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder than someone with just some narcissistic protectors or tendencies? But I'm wondering what you have to say about mental health as well, and if there is a way to also heal those things, or are we just stuck in those patterns until we leave our body?
No, absolutely not. I believe truly that everybody can heal, that if they really truly want to, there are tools, techniques, ways of releasing and healing the body, which is why I wrote my book. It is so comprehensive, but the number one way I would do that is through EFT. So, what EFT does is it actually helps to release that trauma. So, you're talking about somebody who's narcissistic. So, somebody who is narcissistic actually has really low self esteem, but overcompensates and does things very grandiosely and may look confident to some people who are not so aware. But truly what's happening though is that there's a lot of trauma that has happened. There's limiting beliefs, there's fears. And if they can start to work through that, it will change their behavior. They will change who they are. They will find the value in themselves through releasing this heavier stuff. They will realize and have more compassion for themselves because through EFT, you talk to yourself very kindly. You say, even though I'm experiencing this thing, I deeply love and accept myself. So through that loving kindness, through the tapping, because when you tap, which is what you do in EFT, you are accessing these meridians that have this stored energy and information. So then it's able to leave the body. But then also what happens in the brain, because this is a mind, body, spirit transformation in the brain, the neural networks around not feeling like you're good enough or that everybody hates me or I'm never going to be picked for something or whatever the belief is will be taken down and replaced with a calmer, newer understanding. So as we tap and talk, we calm down. So let's take something easy. If you have a lot of anxiety, okay, let's say you start really anxious and you start tapping, your energy starts to calm down because you're touching the body, you're tapping, you're hitting the meridians, emotions that are, I think you've seen me on TikTok. I talk about the emotions that are stuck in each one of the meridian points. And that is what helps to release some of that emotion. The body feels even calmer. The neural network comes down and they start to be like, why was I having anxiety? What was that feeling all about? Because it feels so distant because it literally has left the field. So you rewrite not only the energy of the body, but also the energy in the brain and the way you see the world. So no longer are you going to be maybe anxious. Let's say you were about to give a talk. You're not going to be anxious anymore before the talk because you now tapped and talked through it and through the energy of, let's say, any limiting beliefs, fears, or trauma that would be associated with that. So you have a new orientation to the world. So it's extremely productive because you don't need to go back and work on that stuff when you do it properly.
That's so powerful. And it's so interesting to me how kind of energetically delicate humans seem to be, especially through childhood, because I think it's so interesting that we aren't commonly educated about this, because even people that didn't have like capital T trauma in their childhood, we still like absorb pain and patterns and limiting beliefs. It's almost like there is no perfect childhood that I've ever heard of where there isn't some level of like bullying at school or fear of XYZ thing or a painful memory with a sibling. And then it just creates these little energetic things that want to be held on to so we never feel that pain again. And it's so interesting to me how like seemingly easy it is for us to absorb these things.
Right. Well, so the ages of 0 to 7, you're in a meditative state, essentially. So you're absorbing a lot of the programming that is around you. So that's where you hear like money doesn't grow on trees. Who do you think you are? You're not special. Those kinds of things really sink into a child because of one, they're a child, but also two, because they're in this special meditative state. I'll give you an example. I was working with a client one time and in her field, I could see that she was sitting down on the floor with her mother because she wanted to bake cookies. I thought, oh, that's really nice. Your mom wanted you to like bake cookies with her and she set you up on the floor. There was a blanket and all kinds of stuff. And she's like, no, I wanted to be up at the counter. And I always thought, why am I not good enough to be up at the counter? So that instantly made a lens in which she saw the world. I'm not good enough. And even mom doesn't think I'm good enough. So then she started to be like in gym class, oh, I'm not, had the energy. I'm not going to get picked, let's say. And, I'm not good enough. And so then she was like, see, I'm correct, because she didn't get picked because maybe she was very meek and like just assumed. We show up differently based on our beliefs. So then the next time, like when it was time to give a presentation, she's like, well, I won't be good enough to give the presentation. Somebody else should. And then they always fall back. So it creates this lens in which we see the world, and it stacks on top of each other. But what I have seen is that if you can do tapping and you go back, energetically speaking, through time and space in the body, you can pull out that original event where she created that lens where she was like, I'm not good enough to be at the counter, pulls that out and is like, oh my gosh, mom was being so kind. She set me up with a bowl, a blanket, all the stuff. Like mom obviously loved me. I was good enough. And then everything else just leaves because it's unsupported. It's like a table that doesn't have any legs anymore. It can't stand. You don't need to see energy like I do. But when you do the tapping on, like you would say, even though I don't feel good enough, I deeply love and accept myself. If you do that long enough and you stay consistent with the things you're feeling, the things that are popping into your head, maybe you hear something, maybe you see something, and you talk about it, you will unwind that energy and let that go. And it won't be a belief of yours. You will change the lens in which you see the world. And truly that lens is called the reticular activating system. You might be familiar with this lens if you've ever bought a car and you were like, oh, I want to get a white car. And all you see on the street are white cars. You're like, did everybody get a white car? It's only because your brain has tagged it as important that you see it. So that's the lens that I'm referring to. It's literally in the brain.
The reticular activation system is so important because that's the whole point of magic hour. We're training your brain to see the magic and look for the magic and notice the magic. It's so important. And it's so interesting what you were saying about the ages of 0 to 7. And we don't hit the age of reason yet. Before that, we're just in this like energetic sponge like state. And it makes me feel bad for parents. I'm not a parent myself, but like these well meaning things can happen. And then all of a sudden it creates this domino effect in your wide open sponge child. And so, what would you say, just like a message to the parents out there? Because, of course, nothing is perfect and we have our own soul lessons to go on, but just, it's so tricky and delicate.
Right. So actually, I am a mother. My son's 11 now, but I used to think to myself, I wonder how I'm screwing him up because you just don't know what they're thinking. I remember, here's an example. I tucked him in probably 98% of his childhood. Like I'm talking even at 11, 98% of the time. And there was some time where he was like 6 and he was like, mom never tucks me in. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you possibly even think that? I had like maybe missed one. And that's what your brain remembers. And that's important for everybody to understand because obviously he was very upset about it. I wasn't, for whatever reason, I don't even know what happened at that time, but I wasn't there to tuck him in. He remembered it. It was trauma to him. And his brain was like, I'm going to remember this and we blow these things up. So, I tucked him in 364 days out of the year. And that one time he remembers, and then he changed the whole story. So of course, when he said that, I was like, wait, can we talk about this? Cause I literally have tucked you in every single night. I always trust though, that the things that are supposed to happen will happen. And if he is meant to learn a certain lesson, he will. And I always was like, well, when he's an adult, I can help him out or I can get him help, like you just got to let go. You got to do the best that you can. You have to show up as best as you can. That's definitely, I don't know if you know the 4 agreements, but it's one of the agreements is always do your best. I always do that so I don't have regrets. And you just got to trust in God that, things are going to work out, or the universe, or however you believe, because people will write the programming how they see fit. It's not so much the trauma, it's what we make of it.
Yeah.
Like I am a twin and I could see something and my sister sees something and we have totally different experiences of the same thing, even being twins. So that's important to understand. So sometimes we think, you were talking about big T, little T's can add up to a big T. Because like I said, that little T was the mom setting everything up on the floor and then her wanting to be up at the counter. That turned into a big T because she saw that she wasn't good enough by the time she was 20. She had all the evidence in the world to say, I am not good enough. But here's the thing is that there were plenty of people and experiences and things that happened that showed her that she was good enough, but her reticular activating system could not pick it up because it was not important to her, because she believed that she was not good enough. So she wouldn't hear the things that were supporting that she was. And this is important for all moms out there. Like a lot of times moms are trying to do their best and always worrying about everybody's emotions and feelings and what do they need, what do they want, that we forget to hear, oh, mom, you're the best mom in the world, or that was the best dinner I've ever had, or you always remember when I need something and I love you so much. A lot of times, most moms, because they're so concerned about taking care of everybody else, they don't take those energetic gifts. And I literally see lots of women, especially women with autoimmune disease, it looks like little gifts in front of their body that have been waiting to be opened up. So can you imagine if you gave somebody a gift and they were like, thanks, and they just like put it aside? You would be like, wait, open it up. I created that for you, or I bought that for you. Like, I want you to have it. So I often tell women who are chronically ill to sit down, open up those gifts, and literally take that energy into their heart, because that is what fuels our body, our energy, our soul, our purpose. It's why you're running around and taking care of everybody else. Take 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the morning to just kind of review the day from the day before, or whatever you need, whatever works for you. But you have to take that stuff in. Otherwise, you will think you're never enough.
Yeah. Oh, so much good stuff in there. I do feel called to say too that like going back to that 0 to 7 time period of kids being like a sponge, like the love imprints too. The love imprints too. Like everything that you do to take care of your kid and love your kid and encourage your kid, like all of that is also so important and infused.
It's so true.
It's just so easy to prioritize and only look at what are the mistakes, but it goes into that same energetic pattern that you're just talking about of that like reticular activation system, only focusing on what isn't enough. So I want to say that. And I feel like kids focusing on the little t trauma or the things that are painful feels like a way that they're trying to understand who they are in the world and the creation of an ego story in a time when their brain is still developing. And that just seems unavoidable because they're searching for meaning. So, that love that mothers and fathers are imprinting in their kids is like what the truth is that they'll always come back to if they have loving parents, but they're searching for stories and meanings, and the ego is developing. It's a little baby ego there, and that's just seems like a natural part of the human experience.
Absolutely. And did you know that when you love on your kid, their brain actually grows? And when you love on your kid, their nervous system relaxes. And this is also why we all, as parents, need to do our own regulation of our nervous systems, because our kids look to us to regulate their nervous system. So it is important that we are regulated so that they become regulated as well.
Yeah. I want to also just before I go on to the next thing I wanted to ask you, I want to touch on what you said about autoimmune because it's so important. And I know 80% of cases of autoimmune disease in the United States are women. So it makes sense that women sometimes have an uncomfortable connection to receiving. And it's like we don't feel comfortable in that energy sometimes, especially if we're in this like fight or flight activation of just constantly go, go, go. And so it was so interesting to me. You know, you said you see the energetic patterns of things and how autoimmune to you shows an energetic pattern of not accepting the gifts in the present moment and continuing to fly past them. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit deeper about the energetics of autoimmune.
Sure. So, like I said, women are programmed to take care of others before themselves. Otherwise, it's labeled as selfish. Like if you start taking care of yourself first, usually that's the programming that's given to us. So it makes a lot of sense why women would be the people who are most likely to get in autoimmune stuff. When we are the people that are always taking care of everybody else, our nervous system is in high alert. And that creates a cascade of chemicals throughout the body and chemistry that puts us into a state that is not of growth, that is not of healing, that is not good at sleeping, that is not good with intuition. Like, you are not your best self when you're in a heightened state. So that's first and foremost, and that's usually why the autoimmune problems develop. So anytime that you can start to regulate your body, so taking the time to, I teach a gentle nervous system reset on my social media because I wanted to take EFT and make it really simple for people for 10 minutes. And it's transforming lives because it gives them that moment to down regulate and realize how well they're really doing overall. Like, because again, when you're trying to take care of everybody else, your focus is outside of you, not on inside you, and you aren't picking up those gifts. So there's really no way to refill the cup, and it's always trying to pour from an empty cup. Listen, I learned this lesson real big when I was 26 years old. So I am speaking from personal experience here. And still, there are times that I realize I'm going back into that pattern where I'm over giving, and I realize, no, the best person that I can be is when I have a balanced relationship with that, with giving and receiving. So the other thing that I will say is that oftentimes women don't like receiving, but it is a form of control. So when we are only the people who give, we are controlling the narrative, or we're controlling what's happening. By not receiving, we are not opening ourselves up to being vulnerable, because it's too hard to expect somebody to do something nice for us if we feel too vulnerable. So we're like, I can't even go there. If this person doesn't show up for me when I need it, and so because I want to receive something, I need to receive something. If they don't show up, I will be crushed because I took care of them all the time, or I did all this stuff, and they can't even show up that one time that I need them. So working on letting go of control and trusting the process and believing that things are unfolding in a divine way is going to bring more nervous system regulation. It's going to obviously give you more energy, and the magic will start to appear. When we let go, we let in the magic. We let in God to take over, or the universe, or however you look at the synchronicities to come in. But so often it's so hard to get to that vulnerable state where you say, I need help, or I'm willing to receive. And then you just wait. And if you are let down, it is a very good time to look at why. Like, you know what I mean? If you can't receive when you need it, that's good information. And having a tool like EFT is really helpful to get you through that whole thing and try to reprogram and deal with the trauma.
I think sometimes we avoid hard truths, and it just prolongs the dysregulation and the pain and the discomfort. And if somebody isn't showing up for you the way you need them to, instead of plowing ahead and doing everything all the time for everyone else, like, that's valuable information in itself. And I think the body is also speaking to us, and there's always these common energetic patterns between the energetic lessons and what's happening in the physical material world. And there might be a pattern here of, like, not looking at little symptoms or looking at yourself or the things that are clearly getting your attention, and not wanting to know the dysfunction in your relationships or patterns in the external world as well. And it's like all interconnected.
Right. It is really hard to see those things, and it takes a lot of courage to do it, but it is way better to recognize it early on and not build the anger, the resentment, the grief, the trauma to your body. Because I see this a lot with people who are very ill. They are in a bad relationship, or they are at a job that is abusive, or they are doing a job they hate. These things take up a lot of our time and energy. And when we're not receiving back, or we are constantly in fight or flight within those time periods, it's going to take a toll on our body. So sometimes it's not about getting a better diet, or going and getting stem cells, or I don't know, taking a vacation. It's like leaving the relationship. It's finding your purpose. It's maybe fixing a relationship that has been broken for a really long time and it's been really hard on you. Like that's where healing sometimes really is. And that was my big aha moment, was when I realized that, because I was like, oh my gosh, you have to eat organic. You have to make sure that you have no pesticides and I don't know, all the things. And while those things are good and true and necessary to a degree, what's more important is the state in which you're receiving those things. So if you have an organic diet, but you are in fight or flight, that stuff's going right through you. You are not going to be able to process that food the way that you need to. You're not going to get the nutrients. You're not going to be able to digest it the way that you should be. So that's why I realized you need to go to the mind. You need to go to the trauma, the looping, fears, limiting beliefs, things like that. If you can start to pull those out and fix those, the body naturally returns to homeostasis and is calmer and can receive those good things. Then you really start healing, because then the work is really making a difference. The healthy food, the home cooked meals, the spiritual teachings, everything lands differently when we're in a regulated state.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to that same energetic patterns of missing the gifts. Like we can give ourselves the spiritual teachings, the healthy food, the exercise classes, but if we're not listening to ourselves, regulated, looking at the deeper things, we miss the gifts right in front of us, or we're not interacting with them to the full capacity that we really have the potential to. There's so much I want to talk about with you. I'm having like the best time right now, but I don't want to miss this opportunity to have somebody who's so scientific and an energy healer. I really am curious to get into the mechanics from your point of view of how energy healing works.
So essentially when I started, first of all, I had that I heard that I could heal with my hands. I took classes. I started to see and feel energy in people's bodies. Thankfully, I had friends that were like, hey, sure, you can work on me now that you're trained. And I started to see, okay, when I do this in the body, which to me, I'll just explain one thing, for instance, I would see like a gray, dark, heavy energy. Okay. And I'd pass my hand over it. The rest of the body would be nice and smooth. And if I passed my hand over that dark gray energy, it would slow down. And I was like, that's weird. What is that all about? So the more that I could just kind of work that gray energy out of the body, the better they felt. So that was like the very first level, I would say, in which I started to explore. And then I started seeing dots on people's bodies. And I would be like, my wife, I'd go up to her and I'd be like, what's this dot? And I'd push on it and she'd be like, ah! It was pain dots. And it was also acupuncture points that I was seeing on the body. So that was like the next level that I started getting. And then the next one was I was working on this woman and I passed my hands over this blocked energy and I heard 12 years ago got a divorce. And I was like, whoa, that makes sense to me because it was in her arm and grief leaves down from the heart, down out the thumb. And of course, nobody taught me this. I would always be listening when I'm doing these things. And I swear I had these spiritual teachers that were just like, take it out the thumb, Amy. That's where the grief goes. And then like a year later, 2 years later, I'd be reading a book and it'd be like, take the grief out of the thumb. And I'd be like, oh, great. I've been doing that. So when I passed my hand over that story, I was like, wow, this energy actually has information in it. And it's telling a story about what's going in her body. So I had the courage to say to her, did you have a divorce 12 years ago? And she was like, oh, it was 11 and a half years ago. I was like, well, okay, that was close enough. And then the other time was they gave me a word I'd never heard in my life before that time. And it was atherosclerosis. I can't even say it. And I was like, I don't want to say anything to her because I don't even know what that means. So I went home and I looked it up and it's hardening of the arteries. And it was related to the grief that she was holding in her chest. So I just kept stacking these kinds of things up. And then again, like I said, I learned the EFT. And then when I started to see the people with the same diagnoses and the same energy signatures and the same limiting beliefs, fears, and programs, I was like, I got to undo this. Like, I got to find the thing that's going to just get rid of it all. And that was EFT. And that's why I'm so passionate about teaching people about EFT and also tapping on the body. Really, when we get the body in a regulated nervous system, that they can heal. That's where we're supposed to heal. And the people who I worked on, this was without even EFT. I did not, at the time, like I said, I worked with them. They all had the same signatures. I started doing the energy work. I started removing some of these programs the way that I had learned to, and they had 80% improvement in symptoms. I literally had better results than medication. And it wasn't all of them that had those results. It was 2 of them were around 80%. The next one was like 60%. Others were like 30%, 40%. Nobody was at the level of the medication that was meant for that.
Wow.
So for me, that was big information. And that's why I went looking for this tool. And then if I used that tool with them, I can't even imagine. They all would have been fine.
Yeah. And so, how did you get involved in the lab tests of your gifts, and what did those look like and what did they measure? Oh, actually, before we go into that question, the gray matter thing that you said is so interesting because it's rare for me to see auras. I'm such a deep feeler and a knower. But there have been 2 times in my life that I have seen that dark gray matter around people. And both times it was everything. There were no other colors. It was all dark gray. And within the week, both of them passed. And they were both people who it was like surprising that they passed. And so it's really, and I've told that story on the pod before. So you saying this now is like clicking interesting things into place for me because it was all the dark gray. And I saw it as an aura color around them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, it was dysfunction in the body. So basically what we were talking before about how the cells communicate through energy. And when that communication is broken down, whether it's through an emotion that gets in the way, a toxin, or an injury, the energy slows down there. Obviously, it's like a broken connection, like it can't travel the same way. So the traffic slows down and it creates this congestion. Now, if you imagine somebody who's going to pass, there's probably a lot of congestion in there, a lot of broken communication. So that's so interesting. But okay, so for the lab, everything comes first full circle. So when I first started energy healing, one of the first things I read about it was this study about using Reiki and reconnective healing to heal ginkgo leaves. And when they did Reiki on the leaves, it lasted 30 days. When they did reconnective healing, it lasted 90 days, whereas the control was like 7 days or something like that. So it was clear that the energy was doing something. And I remember being like, wow, that's so cool. I want to be involved in energy healing studies. And that was right in the beginning. Now, fast forward 16 years later or 15 years later or something like that, I decide it's time to put my money where my mouth is. I know this stuff works. I want to help and contribute in some way to the scientific understanding of energy healing and the power of it. So I find out about this lady who is testing people for the research that they're doing. And I contact her. I set up an appointment. I go to Arizona. I live in Colorado. I go to Arizona and we do the test. Now, only when I'm writing the book do I realize that the same person who helped create the study originally was the same person who I met. I didn't even know it was the same person who was conducting the studies. So that was really cool, or helping to conduct the studies. So I was nervous. I mean, I had done this for 16 years. I knew it was going to work, but who knows? I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel like, what if it doesn't work today? It's never happened, but like, what if it doesn't, you know? So I go in and I actually have a headache that day, which I was like, man, I thought I did everything right. Like I got a good night's sleep. I had the right food, you know, everything. So I go in and they start to put me through all these tests and they do it very quickly. And I think the reason why they did it quickly was so that I didn't think too hard about what I was doing. I can't even remember the exact order of things, except for I know at the end was when we used the equipment from NASA. But one of them was like, okay, Amy, start and stop the energy between your hands, you know, like run it, stop it, run it, stop it. And so she was like, I had to be able to do it exactly as she was asking, and then I could do that.
So they were measuring and they could quantify the energetic output from your hands, and like they were in real time measuring you turning it on and turning it off. That is so cool.
Yeah. So on that day, I was less interested in the devices they were using to measure these things. I was just interested in passing. Like, I just wanted to know, like, did it work? Did I do it right? So she'd be like, great. Okay. You did it. Next thing. Then she handed me water. This is what blew my mind. She handed me water that was in a cup, a plastic cup, and it was a pH of 9. And she said, I want this to be a pH of lower than 7. And you have 5 minutes. I was like, okay.
I have full chills right now.
I was like, I've never done this before. Like, I know that the mind is powerful, but okay. So she's like, you can only use your hands and your mind to change the water. And I was like, obviously. So I put my hands next to it and I start envisioning it going to below 7 as making it more acidic. And about 2 minutes in, I'm like, hey, like, if this didn't work, will you let me do it again? She was like, sure. So she goes and she tests it and she's like, actually, you did it. It's 6.7.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And so I was like, whoa. She's like, but there's a problem. And I was like, uh-oh, what? She's like, you don't have the right amount of particles in the water to match what 6.7 is. So when something is more acidic, it has more particles in it. But I only changed the acidity. I didn't change the number of particles in it. This is how specific I was with my mind and my energy. And so she was like, I need you to download the particles into the water so that it will be a match. So I downloaded the particles into the water and it was a match to 6.7. The fact that I could do that still blows me away. Like, when we don't get in our own way, we are so powerful. And obviously I've trained my brain and, you know, I've done a lot of things to get to the point where I would be able to change something like that. But even still, like, it was hard for me to imagine. So then after that, they wanted to find out if I run DC current from my body, like a lot of DC current from my body.
And can you explain what DC current is?
So DC is what we charge our computer with, like our phones, we run our cars with and things like that. So I actually had volts coming from my body and it was a lot. She didn't tell me how many. So she just said, you do. She's like, we had a feeling that you did and you do. And I said, I kind of had a feeling that I did too, because every time I have a watch or a phone or a computer or things like that, they die. Or if I get overly emotional, they will shut down and can't work for an extended period of time. And I've also jump-started 2 cars that had dead batteries in it with my energy. So it was like, I figured that was possible, that I had DC current. So then we moved into another room where they had equipment that NASA uses with their astronauts. This is what I was told, that because there's no doctor on board, they have to know like what's going on in their body. So they scan their energy, which is very telling about how much they know that energy creates problems in the body if it's not flowing right. Anyway, so they said, okay, we need you to heal this person. This person was in the room and she's going to tell you what you're going to heal or help heal, because they heal, you know, we're only facilitating the healing. They actually heal themselves. So they scan her. I do the energy healing on what she says. It was like her knee or something like that. I don't even remember. And then they scan her again. They showed a change in the field around that area. She said it wasn't hurting her, blah, blah, blah. My turn. They're like, now you have to heal yourself. You can pick anything you want. They scan me. I was like, well, I have a headache. Maybe I'll just do that. So I healed my headache and they scanned me and I passed. And I have the paperwork somewhere. They showed, you know, the before and after. I don't think most people would be able to understand what it looked like. I didn't even understand really, other than you could just tell there was like problem areas. So yeah, that was my experience. And I passed the test. And if I ever want to be a part of research, I can be. It has been hard for me to find a time where I want to do that, you know, because I am trying to educate so many people. I was writing my book. I had a podcast, you know, I'm raising a son. It's important for me to take care of myself. So like balancing all of that hasn't been possible yet. But ultimately, I really wanted to just see, because I wanted to connect science and spirit. I wanted to see how they would do it, but also see that I could pass using scientific instruments.
This is so cool. And connecting science and spirit is like everything to me. As a medium, I would love to be tested. And I know mediums are doing that too. It's like, it's so cool how science is catching up, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's just a different language for the same thing. And it's so powerful. I did want to say, I think it's really interesting that you had a headache the day of the experiments, because I'm wondering, and you said sometimes you're afraid that like, it won't turn on that day or whatever, which every practicing intuitive or healer, people working in this unseen field have the same like moments before they start to work. And so I'm wondering if that headache was signaling to you, like where that limiting belief is, or that pattern of like not trusting it. And it just connects so perfectly to everything that we're talking about. And then I love that they're doing those experiments and that other people have passed them too, like that they're bringing different healers through these experiments. And that I love that we are holding this work to a higher standard of evidence now. Like it's really powerful, and it takes the charge away from people that are not actually authentic in this space and are doing harmful work or trying to scare people into charging for money. Like I really hope that science gets to a certain level where there can maybe even be like an accreditation or something of a standard of work that people can trust. And I think that that is so powerful.
Yes. So I did get a certificate that said that I passed, and certified energy practitioner, I think I got. And yeah, I do agree that that would be helpful if we had more people who could prove their skills in such a way that then we know that they're doing what they say they're doing. But the reason why I am so passionate about helping people to heal on social media and teaching them about their own energetic body is because we need to be able to heal ourselves. Like we need to feel empowered and capable of doing that. Sometimes we do need outside help. And I even go to people myself when I feel blocked, because we are meant to need other people. Like that's the way we're wired, for connection, and people can see things differently when they're outside of us. But ultimately we can probably get ourselves, depending on how dedicated we are, 80 to 90% there. And we might need a little help after that.
Yeah. And it's just like self divination is so much more difficult, in my opinion, than reading for other people sometimes. I feel like self healing probably. It makes sense why we would sometimes need outside help or eyes or things like that too that aren't so in it. Yes. The last thing I want to say before we get into where everyone can find you and connect with you is that the DC current thing is so interesting to me, because in the mediumship world, we call this force the power. It's not like exactly the same thing, because there's also like a connotation of spirit being part of the power. But I think people with natural healing and mediumship gifts give off an electric current. So I love that they actually tested you for this, because this is something I've suspected, because I think that people who are mediums or have a higher level of that DC current running through them, psychic phenomenon and material phenomenon, spiritual phenomenon happens in our presence, because we're generating a lot of power for spirit to work with. And I think that those are people who are like, I live in a haunted house and all of this stuff is happening. It's like, no, my love, like it has nothing to do with the house. It has everything to do with your guides getting your attention through your higher current of energy and how you could work with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's cool that they tested that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I only suspected that I ran it. And the story I tell in my book about how we were coming down from a hike, and there was a guy who had a pickup truck from the 70s that he had built a house on, and the truck wouldn't start. And so we originally tried to start his truck with my Infinity. It was, at the time, it was almost brand new, Infinity GX 35 or something like that. And he couldn't start it. And so the guy was like feeling all defeated. And I'm like, man, that's his home. He's supposed to be meeting his friends out in California soon, like that day. So I was like, do you mind giving me the keys? And he was like, why? And I was like, just trust me. So I take the keys and I put it in. And because I think it was a key, I mean, I've also done a push start. I was able to use my energy, but that was probably easier than trying to jump a very, very old truck. Anyway, I turned the key and I was with all my friends. So I have witnesses who were hiking with me. And they all burst into laughter when I turned the key and it started. And what's interesting though is that I got very, very thirsty afterwards. So I believe that the electrolytes changed in my body, which created this like current that made me very thirsty. So I was like, who's got water after I got in the car? But this hippie guy, man, he didn't even know my name. And he just like looked at me like, what just freaking happened?
Yes.
I'm not the only person that can do this. Other people have done this before. And, I only kind of found out about it after, because again, I wanted to find the science behind it. Like, how is this even possible? All I know is that I just generated enough current through my body to start it.
That is so cool. And sometimes after readings, I'm extremely thirsty or extremely hungry too. So yeah, we're definitely on to something. And it gives me so much hope that science is going in these directions and proving these things. And we don't have to leave materialism behind, but we can expand it and expand our understanding and also give more credence into these like paranormal activity and phenomenon.
Yeah.
Oh, Amy, I could talk to you and interview you and pick your mind for hours and hours and hours, but I know that we're at our time. So, how can our community find you? Can you tell us about your podcast, your book, all the things? And I really hope that you guys will check out her TikTok because that's where I first found Amy. And she has so many good videos on nervous system regulation and tapping. And I think that it's so useful for the times we're living in too.
Absolutely. So my book is called Bridging the Divide. So it's bridging science and spirit. It's bridging the mind and the body, the seen and the unseen, the inner world, the outer world. I share my journey throughout. I have great exercise at the end of chapters to help with the self-reflection of what they just learned. And so it really is a journey. I literally, when I was writing it, visualized me holding somebody's hand and walking them over this bridge of knowledge. I'm sure you probably feel the same way. It's like, if everybody knew what I knew, they would be so excited to be here and to heal themselves and to create the life that they want. So that was the intent of the book. And my podcast is called The Stark Transformation Show. And you can find me at Stark Transformation on all of my social media channels, including YouTube, and also starktransformation.com is my website.
Amazing. I'm going to order your book. I definitely want to dive into
It's
that.
beautiful. Here, let me show it.
Oh, it is beautiful. Oh, gorgeous. I'm so grateful for people like you.
Thank you. I'm grateful for you. Thank you for doing this work. It's very important that we talk about these things and share the knowledge and bring the magic to people because it's all around us. We just need to be able to recognize it and see it.
1,000,000%. Thank you so, so much again.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves, the part of the podcast where I sit with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in the spirit world and give the messages for the collective. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Before we get into it this week, I just wanted to say a little technical note. I know that I warn on the podcast quite frequently to watch out for pretenders and scammers. And so I just wanted to let you know, to my knowledge, they are not able to replicate emails coming from at angelsandamethyst.com. And the scheduling email that is legit and my email that is legit is scheduling at angelsandamethyst.com and Taylor at angelsandamethyst.com. And same for Magic Hour. It's contact at magichourpod.com. So just look out for anyone on Instagram. That's really where they try to scam you the most, is social media, TikTok and Instagram. And then if anyone emails you with like a Gmail or a Yahoo email, I was just listening to Lana Del Rey's new single and said Yoohoo. So yes, that is the note there. If it comes from my website, it is from me. Scheduling at angelsandamethyst.com, and my assistant, who is also a hummingbird, is named Melanie. So you can expect emails from her. Okay, getting us into the messages this week. I'm doing my best to articulate the layers of energy coming through because it feels, as always, like we're navigating really energetically layered times. And sometimes it can be hard, or not even hard, but overwhelming to tune into collective messages during these times. And I know that from week to week, there might be elements that sound like a broken record, but at the same time, it's just the truth of the energy that we're navigating right now. And I think we can all feel that bigness, that we're living in these epic, mythical, trajectory changing times. And so the first layer that I want to talk about is that on an intuitive development level, which means, of course, it's also a personal development level because both are so tied. Self doubt, and I know I talked about this on a sitting with spirit not too long ago, that self doubt does not create the conducive condition to bloom. And I want to go a little bit further with this because on an intuitive development level, self doubt, cynicism, and skepticism overall, although I will say asterisk that I think a healthy dose of those things are good, of course, and I love evidential approaches to this work. When you're developing your intuition and you're a baby in the space and you're just starting to remember your wings and you're just starting to get over the ego stories trying to hold you back, self doubt can be fatal because when we do not believe in ourselves and we truly doubt ourselves, our brain creates evidence and only filters out what supports its deepest belief because our brains are powerful creators. And so, on an intuitive development level, if we're telling ourselves the story, I'm not connected, I'm not the chosen one, everything I'm saying is wrong, other people can do this, but I can't. If we're telling ourselves those stories, our brain will filter everything out to make that belief come true. And so self doubt as like a frequency literally intercepts intuitive truth and intuitive information because that is proving the brain in that story right. And it's really hard, even as a professional in this space, to read for people who are super skeptics. And I can read for people who don't believe but have an open mind. That's completely different than people trying to disprove this or look for evidence of it being wrong. It really is a tough energetic frequency to hold space for because their brain is going to continually fight to defend their point of view. So there's just a message here of like, if you're on an intuitive development journey, and I was just talking about this with my round 2 mentees, like, even if you have to be a little delusional in the beginning of fake it till you make it, of being confident, of rewiring those deep stories of self doubt, it's important because it creates the conducive conditions for you to actually trust what you're getting, say what you're getting, and so, because this is true in the intuitive development space, it's also true in the self development space. And when we are in stories of self doubt, we keep ourselves from blooming and transforming as a person. So, really look at where that self doubt might be coming up, since this is such a strong thing that I feel called to talk about today. And it feels like it's really important energetically right now because I really do feel like we've been in this crossroads moment of a lot of change and transformation and a really powerful moment for up level. And as I was tuning into the energy this week, I felt, again, this is the part that is not new. So much overthinking, so much fear in the collective, so much self doubt, so much pain and intensity, and so many crown chakra blocks. Like, it feels like there's a lot of heaviness. The message that I got is our ego is super uncomfortable, but our soul is super proud of us. Our soul is pushing us to continue, and our soul is proud of us for the changes and the growth. And so the message that I got about this is that it's a tremendously heightened moment for creation, which means it's a tremendously heightened moment for fear. And that fear is the gatekeeper for creation. Creation can never come through without fear. And this feels so important to say because even whatever we're creating, whether it's new life, a business, a project, a new version of self, fear is always the gatekeeper. It's true in intuitive development too. It's like That's why intuitive development and personal development go so hand in hand. And I really stress this in my program, Becoming the Oracle, with my mentees. Strengthening your fear muscle, feeling the fear and doing it anyway is the building block to co-creating your highest timeline with your heart, your intuition, your higher self, and your guides. And so because we're in this moment with so much potential for creation and change, fear is like going buck wild, trying to really keep us small. And I saw this image of helicopters. We're all familiar with the idea of helicopter parents. These were helicopter thoughts. And I felt like our protectors of self doubt, black and white thinking, overthinking, rumination, like all of these things are zooming around us like helicopters right now, shining their lights, making loud noises, keeping us from moving forward and keeping us going back and forth in our mind. And so the feeling that I got is that we're in a moment to let creation win. And so this ties back to the intuitive development stuff too. And it's all interwoven because we're intuitive, heart led beings having a human experience. And so to me, intuitive development is like the deepest proof that you've gone through a deep healing journey, because you actually are trusting yourself and listening to yourself instead of looking everywhere outside of yourself for how to move forward. And so when we are in intuitive development and we have self doubt, part of the reason this sabotages us is that we get a piece of information and then we sit with that piece of information and we add a story onto it to make sense of it. And so this protector of needing to know and self-doubt and needing to prove that we're really connected takes us out of actual truth and intuitive information and into story. And I feel like that's happening right now in this like very deep portal of creation and therefore fear. And it feels like people are getting like next steps, intuitive hits, pulls. Like intuitive information is always grounding, solution oriented, and present. And then it feels like we get that information and the helicopter thoughts are coming in and being like, but what does this mean about this? Or what does that mean about the future? Or starts making it mean things that disconnect from the original intuitive information received. And it's such an act of becoming the oracle and intuitive prowess to, and this is also something I tell my mentees, I am present and whatever's coming through is enough. Whatever is coming through, whatever intuitive hit you got, be present with it and let it be enough. Don't feel like you have to add a story. Don't feel like you have to prove something. Don't feel like you have to make it make sense. And so it feels like we're in this moment where all of our protectors are grasping. And some of those protectors are going to look like cynicism. Some are going to look like giving up. Some are going to look like black and white thinking. Some are going to look like purposely not trying so we can never fail. It's like whatever that protector is that's coming up for you, that is a good sign that the times are ripe for creation. The times are ripe for creation. And I feel this on a macro scale as well. Fear is a smokescreen and a tool by the powers that be because they can feel the creation brewing. They can feel that we are remembering our power. And I really feel this like warmth in my face and this surge of energy as I talk about it. And it's so important on the micro scale to connect to this path, because when the people are in their power on an individual level, then we can be on a collective level as well. And us walking through the gates of fear to reach that place of fertile creation and co-creation is such an important thing that humanity needs to remember right now. And us taking these journeys on the individual is such an important part of that. And I really feel like, this audience isn't only women, but it's largely women. And I really feel like women's protectors and fearful gatekeepers have been extra turned up living in a patriarchal society. And I really feel that pendulum's shifting and swinging in a really powerful way. So let creation win. When fear is loudest, know that the potential for creation is at its highest. And so I also got this feeling that equilibrium is shifting, power is shifting, New normals are happening, and I'm really speaking for the individual and the collective. I really feel like the tectonic plates beneath us, like moving and shaking, and people's footing being different. And what matters is changing, and what we value is changing, and what power looks like is changing, even if it's slow. Even though as I feel it, I don't feel like it's slow. I feel like we're waking up in a powerful, powerful way. And so, with this intense moment of creation and fear and shifting, come back into your heart. Trust that whatever's coming through as your homework assignment in this moment is enough. Release the need to know, release the need to prove, and just continue to co-create with this Phoenix energy, because I really feel like for so many of us, we're in such a deep evolution portal and like empowerment portal. And I'm so excited to see how the change and creation shifts for us. Our homework assignment for these times is staying present and listening to our heart and moving forward from there. Because it might be really tempting in these times to plug into a story to make sense of things, but that's not going to help us. It's no different than burying our head in the sand in any other way. Come back to your heart, co-create with your heart, listen to your higher self. And I really feel our angels and guides cheering us on. I feel like our head is so scared and our soul is so excited, because I feel like we are really on the precipice of so much magic. I did pull a card for the week from the Seasons of the Witch by Lorraine Anderson. Okay, someone corrected me and said it's not Imbolc, it's Imbolc. So sorry. But I pulled a card from that deck, and I pulled the bathing ritual card. And this is basically a moment that's like healing, releasing, letting it go, shedding, nourishing, taking care of ourselves, and really leaning into that water element of release. So, as this comes out, we're still in Pisces season, and it makes sense because we're at the end of the Wheel of the Zodiac. Things are being shed and released and forgiven and felt and processed and integrated. And it was just such a beautiful complement to this feeling of portals of new creation and new beginnings and excitement and overcoming fear. So, taking a bath, something I like to do with bath magic is just sitting in the bath. You can just picture everything in the bath water filling up with what you no longer want to carry. And then when you're done with your bath, you let the water drain down and just visualize all of that leaving you as it sinks down into the drain, and you sit in the tub until it's all gone. So that might be a really beautiful thing to do this week if you're looking for a little grounding ritual that brings this in. And I really do feel like just silence and spaciousness and taking care of ourselves and keeping our ears open to receive, keeping our spiritual ears open to receive next steps and trusting those next steps. So, going into the mediumship today, I felt a boyfriend in the spirit world who felt to me like he passed around 25, 26. I heard the name Paul, and he was showing me, and I also saw brown hair. I felt like he might have struggled with big emotions and anger in particular. And I don't necessarily feel like he would have weaponized that against other people, but I do feel like it held him back in life in certain ways. And I do feel like he had a hard time talking about feelings, going deeper, expressing himself. And I feel like he would have come from a not very ideal family situation. And for that reason, there was a certain level of like holding back. So I do feel like something would have happened for him to have been paralyzed and have been in the hospital in a paralyzed, sort of comatose state for a long time and unable to communicate physically. And so it was interesting because before I started connecting with this spirit person, I thought I was connecting with a butterfly spirit because I kept seeing this butterfly flying around. And what I realized was this was a deeper connection to this gentleman in the spirit world. And he was saying that even while his body was still alive, he was sending signs as if he was in spirit to his loved ones. And I felt really called to share that you do not have to physically pass for your soul to send signs. And I think that it can be a really tough concept for some people to understand. But as a medium, and I know I've talked about this on the pod before, I've connected with people who had dementia, who have been in comas, who I thought that they were on the other side because they came in that way. And then they give me a feeling of what their physical body's going through, and the sitter can understand it. And it's because when your physical body is in such a dense state and paralyzed state from those types of things, your soul is already halfway out, already halfway in the spirit world. So you can receive signs from people who are still alive physically because they are also spirit. And I've even had situations where in a reading, I had a parent show up and give me a lot of evidence about who they are, and they're still alive and they're not sick. In those cases, it's been very far and few between in my like thousands of readings. But when that's happened, for example, one of the parents said, I'm no contact with my daughter and I've hurt her in and this way, which the sitter could take, and their higher self, like they were in such a state of mental shutdown in terms of like mental health problems that were undiagnosed, and pain and wounding and narcissism, which I do think is like a disease of consciousness, that they even could communicate. Like their higher self was like, I love her. I understand why she's not talking to me. I'm sorry. And could give the messages that they couldn't while they were shut down in that heavy state. So I really do feel called to say, like, spirit isn't as black and white as only getting signs or only hearing from people when they're actually passed. And there's a lot of like healing and love and messages that can come even when we're in intense physical situations, and the soul can still share its love in different ways. And I just feel like if anybody is doubting those signs or in a situation where they have a loved one that is battling something or is struggling with Alzheimer's or dementia or things like that, I just want you to know, like, they can send signs and they can speak to you just like a loved one in the spirit world would. And they're often talking to loved ones in the spirit world as well. So I thought that it was really beautiful that this spirit person came in to tell us this today and remind me to share it with the community. And you can ask them for signs just like you would a loved one in spirit. So thank you to this beautiful spirit person for this message. And for anybody struggling right now, anybody that is part of this wave of super heaviness in the collective that I'm feeling, I'm sending you all so, so, so much love. I think it would be beautiful for the hummingbird community to just each send each other in the community some healing light through these times. I love you all so, so much, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Magic Hour Podcast. We are so happy you're here. I absolutely love to connect with you all on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. I love to get your thoughts on each episode, and I get so excited to get your emails to contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss a new episode in your inbox. We have so many amazing guests right around the corner. As always, please make sure to send your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll enter you into an angel reading giveaway with me, which is just my favorite thing, to get to connect with the hummingbird community in that way. You get a bonus entry if you also send a screenshot of your YouTube subscription and also a screenshot of sharing us on your story and tagging us at Magic Hour Podcast on Instagram. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 288 5-star reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We so appreciate you sharing the podcast with other magical people, and it really helps us keep this project alive. To learn more about me, my work, to book a reading with me, to take a workshop, please visit angelsandamethyst.com. And remember, you are magic.